Hello, I'm Bernard Hickey from interest.co.nz and welcome to another in our series of double shot interviews. This is where we speak to a chief executive or a minister or somebody who's doing something interesting in the banking, economic, financial scene and ask them about what's happening at the moment. Today I've got John Barclay here, who is the head of personal financial services for Hsbc in New Zealand, essentially looking after all of Hsbc's retail operations. Welcome in, John. Good to see you. Firstly, Hsbc, can you explain to someone in New Zealand who probably hasn't heard of Hsbc who it is and what they're doing in New Zealand?
Well, Hsbc is a truly global organisation. As measured in February of this year, we have the largest financial brand. It's the most valuable financial brand in the world. We've been in New Zealand since about 1986, and in the personal banking space, we started in about early 1990s. But we've always had a presence here initially as an investment bank, then a corporate bank, then a personal bank. So been here a long time. A lot of people think that HSBC is just all about international people, but it's not at all. It can cover the domestic side of people's business as well as international, obviously, business very well.
So who are your customers here on that retail side in New Zealand?
Our customers are very diverse, good mixture of both local and overseas. So that's probably about as much as I want to say on that, but we have a good mix of customers in that base here.
Now, at the moment, you've got this offer out there on mortgages, which we follow all of the rates being offered by the banks pretty closely, and from what we can see, it's the lowest variable rate mortgage. Can you talk a bit more about that mortgage offer?
Sure. I mean, HSBC is one of the most liquid banks in the world at the moment, and we've survived the GFC, as they call it, very, very well. And it's really through that liquidity that we're able to offer such good rates in the marketplace here. It's also something that our customers have been asking for, and it's something that we've able to deliver on. So we're conscious that we'll be able to offer the better rates in the marketplace for some time. So
who can get access to those rates at the moment? Because I think there's a limit on how much you can borrow.
A premier customer in New Zealand qualifies on combined borrowings of $500,000, or if you have on deposit or assets under management with us of over 100,000. So those are the qualifications here. Once you become a premier customer in New Zealand, you become a premier customer worldwide. You don't have to qualify elsewhere. So if the people qualify on that, then they can dedicate themselves, or they can have a dedicated relationship manager with us and partake in being a premier customer.
And what sort of lending do you do in New Zealand? Is there anything you don't lend on? I know some banks are pretty restricted on things like anything that might be a leaky building or townhouses, those sorts of things. Is there anything that you guys don't lend on?
Look, typically we would lend on persons' own occupied property or their investments. Now, in terms of those categories that you talked about, it would really depend on a case-by-case basis as to what that person's background and what part of that investment maybe is made up of their total portfolio. So I wouldn't like to say no, we don't do any particular lending. Some cases we will say no, but it depends on an individual case.
And the funding for various lending, it's been quite topical in New Zealand at the moment. The banks are having to compete hard for term deposits. How does HSBC fund its lending in New Zealand?
Well, it's a mixture of both local deposits and from the group, as you'd expect. We, about 3 years or even 4 years ago, before the global financial crisis, wanted to diversify our funding base. So we have a good mix of both local depositors, whether it be corporate and or retail, and our own issuance out in the marketplace as well as some of our head office funds.
And what is your credit rating like compared to others?
AAA. We've survived the global financial crisis very, very well. I suppose going through these times, our bank has been a conservative bank, and it's through these times that it bodes very well.
Now, I understand that HSBC did own a bank in the United States, which was tied up with some lending, but you seem to have extricated yourself from that now.
Yes, I mean, you've got to remember that HSBC is a global bank, so it's very rare, I suppose, when every country and every region will do well. There's always a region that may have some issues. So whilst our US operation may not have done as well, other areas of the bank have done very well.
And what are you seeing out there in the borrowing landscape in New Zealand? You're one of the challengers, I suppose, against some of the bigger banks. What's the feel out there amongst borrowers?
Look, there's still demand for borrowing out there. We're certainly seeing it through our mortgage campaign, which we announced on the 7th of April. and we do have the most competitive borrowing rates out there for Premier customers, and we will continue to do that going forward. We've been very, very pleased with the levels of activity that's created. So people are keen to still borrow, but more importantly, I think they quite like our service that we offer, and therefore, we're very pleased with the activity to date.
And on the term deposit side, I mean, how aggressively are you competing there for business?
Look, if you looked on your interest.co.nz website, I'd have to say our short to longer term deposit rates aren't the most competitive, and I suppose that's a reflection of both our credit rating, being a AAA, and our global liquidity that our bank is able to generate. So, you can't be best in all fields. We have the best borrowing rates out there, but maybe our deposit rates aren't quite the best.
And what else are you doing in the market here besides term deposits and mortgages?
One of the key things that we launched last year is our wealth management proposition. We launched 4 funds last year in emerging markets in India, China, Asian excluding Japan equity, and a BRIC, which I'm sure you're familiar with. These are both Hsbc actively managed funds, and we've been in that area since 1865, so they're PI compliant, they're emerging markets, so we will look to grow that space further going forward.
And HSBC's a business in New Zealand on the corporate side.
Yes.
What sort of customers have you got there? I mean, are they international firms, or what sort of things?
Look, HSBC's corporate strategy is relatively quite simple. We are truly a global bank, as I've already said, so therefore we tend to focus on those customers, no surprise, that have an international flavour to their business. So it might be a New Zealand company importing or exporting. The New Zealand operation may be a part of an overseas company. So if there's an international flavour to some of those companies' businesses, then we have a very good interest in those companies.
A lot of banks have branches in just about every town in New Zealand. Yep. How do you work with your customers? Because I can't imagine that you do have branches in every town.
No, we have 3 wealth centres, but how we operate is basically 90% of people's transactions are done electronically, and we have one of the better, truly good electronic banking packages, and it's truly global, so you can be anywhere in the world to avail yourself of that, to be able to make payments or see if funds have been received. So we also have an arrangement with Westpac Bank where they service and our ATM machines, and if people do have a need to go and deposit cash or cheques, they can go to any Westpac branch and it goes straight into your account overnight.
Great. Well, there we have it, another double shot interview here at interest.co.nz, speaking to John Barclay, who's the head of the retail division at HSBC here in New Zealand. I'm Bernard Hickey for interest.co.nz.